All right, one of the things I mentioned in the last segment is this propensity, very obvious propensity of the United States to use military force or go to war against countries that can't really fight back. Or we want to go to war to a country we don't actually feel we want to engage directly. We just finance it as a proxy war like we're still doing in Ukraine. But we were told for a full decade now, in fact, going back to the Obama administration kept saying we need to pivot away from the Middle East and focus on the Pacific because the biggest threat now is China. And that's where we need to focus our military efforts. And Obama really never managed that. And then in Trump 1 and in Biden, there was a bipartisan consensus that the biggest threat posed to the United States by far is the growing military threat of China. And both administrations, especially Biden, were very aggressive, surrounding all of the areas near China with all sorts of military assets, using our alliances with nearby countries, South Korea and Japan and the Philippines and Australia, to just make China feel completely encircled, to in fact encircle China. And we were told this was somehow necessary because China is this massive military threat, even though China has not fought a war in the last 46 years. The last war they fought was 1979. It was a 1-month border war. Now, you obviously have to spend a lot of time counting the number of wars the United States has fought since then. But okay, we're told China is the military threat. Even though they haven't fought a war in 45 years, they certainly have been building up their military quite a bit. And yet you see our focus continues to be on the Middle East. Trump bombed Yemen. Trump bombed Syria. Trump has bombed Iraq. Trump bombed Iran. We're arming and funding the Israeli wars against Gaza and the West Bank. And you don't really hear much about China. In fact, when Trump talks about China, he talks about China with respect and admiration. He loves President Xi. There was obviously some talk about tariffs and trade disputes, but in terms of military confrontations, if you watch the military parade that the Chinese had as part of that summit where India's President Modi and the Russian President Vladimir Putin went and very deliberately held hands, the Indian Prime Minister. Right the day after, China had a massive military parade. And if you compare it to the military parade that the United States held, that Trump wanted, it looked like the Harlem Globetrotters and the Washington Generals, with the Chinese being the Harlem Globetrotters. It was an impressive display of weapons, many of which are extremely advanced and built specifically for the United States. And as a result, and this is what I was asking earlier, if you're so concerned about drugs entering the United States, why aren't you telling Trump and J.D. Vance to go bomb Chinese boats or boats that China is using to drown our communities with fentanyl, as we've been told for so long? Why is he bombing Venezuelan boats that, according to U.S. government documents, play no role? And what we're now starting to see is that the Pentagon, which is now the Department of War, is moving away from prioritizing China and instead, as it describes it, prioritizing the American homeland instead. Here's a Political article, September 5th, Pentagon plan prioritizes homeland over the China threat. Quote, a draft of the newest national defense strategy, which landed on Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's desk last week, he's now War Secretary Pete Hegseth, places domestic and regional missions above countering adversaries such as Beijing and Moscow, according to 3 people briefed on early versions of the report. The move would mark a major shift from recent Democrat and Republican administrations, including President Trump's first term in office, when he referred to Beijing as America's greatest rival, and it would likely inflame China hawks in both parties who view the country's leadership as a danger to U.S. security. Quote, this is going to be a major shift for the U.S. and its allies on multiple continents, said one of the people briefed on the draft document. Quote, the old trusted U.S. promises are being questioned. The report usually comes out at the start of each administration, and Hegseth could still make changes to the plan, but in many ways the shift is already occurring. The Pentagon has activated thousands of National Guard troops to support law enforcement in Los Angeles and Washington, and dispatched multiple warships and F-35 fighter planes to the Caribbean to interdict the flow of drugs to the U.S. A U.S. military strike this week allegedly killed 11 suspected members of the Venezuelan Tren de Aragua gang in international waters, a major step in using the military to kill non-combatants. The Pentagon has also established a militarized zone across the southern border with Mexico that allows troops to detain civilians, a job normally reserved for law enforcement. The new strategy would largely overturn the focus of the first Trump administration's 2018 national defense strategy, which placed deterring China at the forefront of the Pentagon's efforts. Quote, "It is increasingly clear that China and Russia want to shape a world consistent with their authoritarian model," the opening paragraphs of that document said. Elbridge Colby, the Pentagon's policy chief, is leading the strategy. He played a key role in writing the 2018 version during Trump's first term and has been a staunch supporter of a more isolationist American policy. Despite his long track record as a China hawk, Colby aligns with Vice President J.D. Vance on the desire to disentangle the U.S. from foreign commitments. A Pentagon spokesman declined to comment on the reviews. The White House did not respond to a request for comment. So it's still a draft, and it could be, there are people who want the U.S. to be much more aggressive in confronting China who are running to Politico to complain that there's a de-emphasis or a deprioritization on confronting China. But as the Politico article correctly observes, you can see it with your own eyes. We're obsessed with Venezuela. We're sending huge numbers of military assets to Venezuela. We want to change the government of Venezuela. We're using our military in the United States more and more. And we are, to the extent there's military action overseas, still obsessed with the Middle East. Where's this China focus coming from? It quite clearly seems not to be there. Now, I think one of the things that you see here is that precisely because there's a lot of disappointment in the Trump administration, not confronting China, continuing to involve the U.S. in all these foreign entanglements in the Middle East. Now this absurd attempt to once again foster regime change in Venezuela and then Cuba, Marco Rubio's long-term dream. It's a dream in the United States going back decades. Donald Trump is very good at giving his followers these little morsels. Like, hey, here's like a crumb of red meat for you to chomp on and boast about on Twitter and feel vicariously strong. And that's what he knew he was doing with this Venezuela stuff. Donald Trump on Truth Social, September 2nd. Earlier this morning, on my orders, U.S. military forces conducted a kinetic strike against positively identified Tren de Aragua narco-terrorist in the Southcom area of responsibility. TDA is a designated foreign terrorist organization operating under the control of Nicolas Maduro, responsible for mass murder, drug trafficking, sex trafficking, and acts of violence and terror across the United States and Western Hemisphere. The strike occurred while the terrorists were at sea in international waters transporting illegal narcotics heading to the United States. The strike resulted in 11 terrorists being killed in action. No U.S. forces were harmed in the strike. Please let this serve as notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs to the United States of America. Beware. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So yeah, okay, I don't know. I know we're involved on these Mideast wars. I know we're still financing the war in Ukraine. I know Trump's now claiming we don't need to see the Epstein files because it's all a hoax. It's all like made up by Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. They somehow went in there and like wrote Trump's name in the like margins, or the friends of Trump. It's all a big hoax. After hearing for 4 years from leading MAGA figures that it was the key to understanding the globalist order. It's now just like a hoax. We don't need to see any of it. So it's like, hey, how about this? Here's a video of us killing 11 Venezuelans. Who likes Venezuelans? Communist, terrorists. Same thing he did in April, when the U.S. vaporized the lives of about 60 Yemenis, 60 Houthis, standing in a circle. Very, very similar to the tribal and prayer circles that they have stood in for centuries. And Trump showed a really exciting video that made a lot of his supporters feel strong, where we just eradicated them out of existence. Trump says these Houthis gathered for instructions on an attack. Oops, there will be no attack by these Houthis. They will never sink our ships again. Obviously, absolutely zero evidence that these people were plotting an attack on the US. Trump just said it. Lots of people decide to believe it. Feels good to believe it. And there you see the people standing there. These are the kinds of, here's the video. They're all standing there. None of them have any weapons. This is the kind of circle that Houthis stand in, and they're just a bomb that comes from the sky, just like the one that blew up that tiny little speedboat. And clearly, every person who was standing there in an instant had their lives eradicated. Did so much good for the people of Ohio and Michigan, Pennsylvania. Incredible improvements in their lives, just like Trump promised to focus on. But it lets his supporters feel like, yeah, we bombed them. As J.D. Vance said, we bombed the scum. Same with the Iran strike. We bombed Iran. We supposedly got rid of their military facilities. And so this is the sort of thing that we're seeing more and more of. And again, I think the question, if I were a Trump supporter feeding on anti-China agitprop for so long, is like, what about China? Like, yeah, great. We killed like 60 Houthis. And we blow up this tiny little shitty speedboat. Great. It's awesome. J.D. Vance got to curse about it, play tough guy. But like, what about China? Weren't we told that they're the root of all evil? Why are we doing nothing to confront them or to contain them in any way? What happened to all that? Including the fentanyl. Is the fentanyl now coming from Venezuela? Or is it still coming from China? And what are we doing about that? So aside from the fact that it's very dangerous, it's also very condescending to Trump supporters. It really is just throwing them little videos of just people being blown up. And you're supposed to, I guess, feel good about it and feel like something has been accomplished. This is just the sort of thing that leaders always do. It's been done throughout the war on terror that never ended, but we kept killing the third highest ranking Al-Qaeda member. I could show you 8 articles where the Bush and Trump and Obama administrations both claimed they killed the third highest ranking Al-Qaeda member. And it's just the sort of thing that keep people distracted, keep people feeling like the government is doing something powerful and strong. People need to see people be blowing up. We want to hear that they're scum, that we killed scum. It's like really, like, it kind of makes you feel strong vicariously. Watching it and cheering it, like, shows you're really tough. But I would submit that all the things that the MAGA movement claimed to be interested in are not even related to, let alone served by, any of these random acts of violence. It lets J.D. Vance prance around and other people play around. Pete Hegseth gets to call himself Secretary of War. That's cool, way cooler than Secretary of Defense. But in terms of substantive achievements or policy changes or improving the lives of the American people, this is all utter theater, utter show, and very dangerous and authoritarian show at that. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.